Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Hidden Wealth TV, the show committed to helping you discover and uncover your hidden wealth. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio, we have Chuck Oliver. He is the founder and wealth strategist at Hidden Wealth Solution. Chuck, it's great to be back for another show with you. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to be back with you.
Well, thank you. Well, we have a jam-packed one again for our viewers this week. And if you were born between the years of 1946 and 1980, you especially do not want to miss today's show. We're going to be talking about something known as the Great Wealth Transfer Trap and how it is a huge problem that folks need to be aware of. That, Chuck, it's something that a lot of folks aren't even familiar with. So let's set this up. When we are talking about the Great Wealth Transfer, what are we referring to?
Well, and we'll help people that don't want to run the calculator. So pretty much those of you that are 44 to 78, right, are going to fall in this. The boomers in the Generation X, as my fellow Generation Xers
yes,
maybe.
mine as well.
Yes. So there's it's projected $84 trillion is going to change hands over the next couple decades between these two generations, and then on to the millennial generation. And people are just not prepared. In fact, it's fascinating. The Census Bureau came out and showed that the greatest number of 65-year-olds that the country's ever tracked, even going back to 1800, was between 2010 and 2020. So this, what we kind of call the silver tsunami, and I have that as well, that's kind of taking its course. We have an age demographic challenge, and all of a sudden this wealth is now going to transfer. And not only is the transferor not prepared, we find with our clients, but the person receiving is not prepared, and the person that's going to be leaving is prepared. And there's things that you can definitely do to make sure that the government doesn't kind of catch you and snarl you in that trap.
Right. Yes, and we're going to get into what that trap is and how folks can be prepared for it. But I think one of the things that really sets you and the team of Hidden Wealth Solution apart is you work with both of these generations regularly. So talk a little bit about that dynamic.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Sometimes I think the client's really kind of catching up with this idea. I think of our clients we just met with out of Dallas, Texas area, and they have 4 daughters, and they're very concerned about their own taxes, and then the concern of the taxes that they could leave on to their daughters. And so they wanted to kind of approach both sides of that. And that was kind of the wake-up call for us, and we're starting to see it more and more, that a lot of times if we're dealing with clients that are just now getting into these required minimum distributions, maybe it's the first year, maybe they've been in it a while, and they're realizing how taxing that situation is, and they don't want their kids to go through the same thing, their adult children, then they'll refer their adult children, or the adult children will see the dynamic of what's happening to the parents complaining about how costly taxes are in their retirement, what they could do to not have to repeat that experience. And so we're seeing that. But at the end of the day, it's so important that really both adult children and parents get on the same page.
Right, for sure. Well, I want to go back to something that you said, because I want to make sure everyone caught it. That is that $84 trillion, $84 trillion with a T, is what's set to pass from the baby boomer generation on down. That is a massive amount of wealth. This is why it's being called that great wealth transfer.
It is, and it's not just the tax risk, Kristen, it's the legislative risk, right? What Congress, it's a lot easier to tax people that aren't here to be a voter, right? So the death taxes are things that people are starting to get really serious about.
Right.
And they should get serious about, because taking away the ability to get your money out of the tax system is really the target, in particular, of certain administrations, that we're seeing all the time, especially with some of the new budgets being proposed by the current administration, where that tax is going to come from, where that revenue that's needed is going to come from when you're already at I think where we are at this point, we're 50% ahead of the deficit spending we were this time the prior year. Yeah. And so there's no spending end in sight. And so you either cut your expenses, right, or you raise the taxes. And so the taxes are going to have to go up. But they're taking away the ability, which I'm sure we can get into, on specific things that people really need to get on their guns and not sit on the sidelines to take advantage of now.
Well, and I think it's important to realize that historically, most retirement planning has been focused on the baby boomer generation up until this point, right? And you mentioned Gen X, which is both of our generations. It's a little hard to swallow to realize that Gen X is now in that retirement red zone, right? The cusp of that 5 to 10 year window before retirement. And if a Gen Xer is receiving a massive amount of wealth at that point in time, that could be their highest earning years. That could create a huge tax burden for them. So this is why we have to look at all these different pieces.
And it's actually one of the things I've written about in my books in the past, that at about the time we expire is about the time that our adult children are going to retire. So they're going to be in their highest wage earning years
Right.
when they really can't afford to put this inherited IRA distribution that's forced upon them. And we see this all the time. We're seeing more and more people reaching out kind of in their mid 40s to mid 50s saying, hey, look, I've got this inherited required distribution and it's pushing me into higher taxes, or it's even pushing them into a higher tax rate.
Right, yeah. So explain, I know we've touched on a little of this, but what is it about the great wealth transfer that matters so much right now? Why is this such a time-sensitive conversation?
Well, because we're all aging, we're aging quickly, and the tax laws are about to change. And so you've got the Tax Cut and Jobs Act in particular that's going to sunset here in a number of months that will lower the estate tax exemption. And so right now it's almost $30 million. A lot of folks that we meet with do not have an estate and or asset protection plan to make sure that they get things out of their taxable estate, because what's going to happen with this compounding effect, which we all want our money to compound, but we're compounding the taxes, we're also compounding the exposure of our estate that people are really not prepared for. And the government's going to not only push up the tax rate, it's been as high as 55%, but they're also going to lower the exemption threshold. And this is going to snarl or entrap more people, unfortunately, of having a good portion of their assets end up going to the government, right, as opposed to their heirs.
Right, and this is what we want to help avoid. I know you're really passionate about making sure that those estate plans are in place, especially from a tax perspective, so that folks aren't inadvertently leaving more money to the government than they are intending to do.
Well, you even look at some of the tax proposals that, the changes today where they want to take the capital gain tax rate up to as high as 44.6%. You've got the restriction of what may be somebody now having an income limitation to be able to do an actual Roth conversion. And now there's even conversation around this thing called an any age RMD we can talk about that will just blow people's minds. So if you worked really hard and well to put your money away tax deferred, even if it's in a Roth IRA, there's a certain threshold called the congressional mandated limit that's not been defined yet, but if you're over that, 50% of that's going to have to come out every year regardless of your age. So lots of changes coming.
Well, and that's one of the things I so appreciate about you and the team of Hidden Wealth Solution is you are on the forefront. You know about these legislative potential changes coming, the risk. You have to be informed because otherwise you can really get hit.
Oh, it catches people so off guard, especially those that have inherited these IRAs, to realize that you can't Roth convert an inherited IRA. And sadly, like I said, a lot of these clients that are coming to us are in their mid-40s, mid-50s, in their high peak earning, wage earning years, and now without any ability to prevent this from happening, this taxation is now forced upon them, and they really don't know what to do. So it's the blessing is that's giving them more insight to say, you know what, let's don't let this happen to our kids. This is what's happening to us. Let's do something more proactive about it. But at the end of the day, the estate piece is just a missing piece in particular because people really don't have their ducks in a row in that particular area. Not just with the tax, but just the protection of keeping your estate out of probate or basically keeping attorneys out of your business.
So how can you help someone who's watching today to make sure that they do have all their ducks in a row? Yeah,
getting a personal wealth blueprint, right? Having something that lays out not just from an estate, but from a tax, from a protection of actually having a thorough retirement plan, not just an accumulation plan where you've got different account statements, but something where you can see the risk of your estate and the risk of your tax that you're facing, so that you can then see the road that you can be traveling as opposed to the one you're probably not that familiar with that you are traveling, so you can get your ducks in a row.
And it's all about protecting someone's wealth at the end of the day, right?
At the end of the day, it's ours and theirs, right? Ours is ours, and unfortunately theirs is theirs. And if you take the word theirs, divide it in half, it actually spells the IRS. And believe me, for most people, sadly, their plan is far better than the client's plan.
Absolutely. Well, the reality is that whether or not you have an estate plan in place, specifically from a tax perspective, you have one. As Chuck said, the IRS has one for you if you don't have your own. We encourage you to get in front of this, no matter what generation you're a part of. If you're the one thinking of leaving the wealth to those that you love, or if you are expecting to inherit some wealth, it is so important to make sure that you are aware of these risks that are out there so that you can be prepared to navigate them well. So if you would like to receive your complimentary blueprint, all you need to do is call 844-837-3652. If you'd rather not talk to someone right now, but you would like to connect, all you have to do is pull out your smartphone. If you open up that camera app, you can point, click, and scan that QR code down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team from Hidden Wealth Solution will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary appointment that that way as well. We have a lot more to get into on today's discussion. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
As a good saver, you've been putting away money during your working years. Studies find that the biggest fear of retirees is running out of money. Market volatility isn't just the downward movement of stock prices, it's the size and frequency of change. The more dramatic the ups and downs, the higher the volatility. This can put savers who are newly retired or a few years away from being retired at greater risk. Today's generation of retirees is not receiving traditional pensions as our parents or grandparents did. Instead, we have retirement accounts such as 401ks or 403bs. These accounts typically expose your money to market risk. The last thing you want right before retirement is to lose a portion of the money you need for income. But how do you turn these accounts into a retirement income? Is it safe to keep all your retirement money sitting in the stock market? The last thing you want is to lose a portion of the money you need for income due to market loss. By working with a financial professional, you can learn how to turn a portion of your savings into an income stream for life and income for the life of your spouse if you're married. We all have moments in our lives when we wish we had taken action sooner. Don't let procrastination reign on your retirement parade. Act now before it's too late. Please call our office to set up your no-cost, no-obligation retirement income review today.
Welcome back to Hidden Wealth TV. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, here with Chuck Oliver, founder and wealth strategist from Hidden Wealth Solution. Today, we are specifically helping you discover and uncover your hidden wealth as it relates to the great wealth transfer. We talked about in the first segment, Chuck, how $84 trillion is estimated to pass from the baby boomer generation on down. Folks need to be prepared for that on both sides of the equation. My question for you is that when folks come in to meet with you for the first time and they are concerned about their retirement legacy planning and making sure from a tax perspective that everything is done in the most tax-efficient manner, what are the most common questions or concerns? What's really at the top of folks' minds?
Not wanting to be a tax burden to their kids. You know, how can we make sure that our kids don't make similar, mistakes that we think that we could have maybe handled in a better way, right? Not building up this ticking tax time bomb with all this money in these tax deferred accounts and then leaving these inherited IRAs, real estate. I mean, there's so many legislative challenges and changes that are being proposed. And so one is helping them understand what they're up against, right? Making sure that they realize, you have to have a plan. And if you don't plan, someone's going to plan for you. So by having an actual plan is first really helping them identify with where they are, right? Get organized with how, a lot of them will tell us, Kristen, I don't think we've really updated this in some time. I'm not really sure, do I need estate planning? But I know the taxes are going to be an issue as part of our estate plan, and we don't want to leave a big tax burden to our kids.
Right.
What do we do?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to represence too that one of the recent changes that made it so that it's a more readily a tax burden to your children, that was the elimination of the stretch IRA provision. Yeah. Can you explain what that was, what the change is, and why, again, now this is a really timely conversation?
Yeah, some people aren't even familiar that the change took place, right? Several years ago now. So the stretch IRA was a way for the inheriting generation to stretch the required distributions out over their life expectancy.
Okay, so let's break this down. Mom and dad leave money to their kids. The kids now have the ability to do what?
Basically stretch out the amount that was left to them in these tax-deferred accounts over their life expectancy, which might be, say, 40 years, depending on the age of the inheritor. Yeah. And that way they could spread that tax out over a much longer period of time. And as you well know, right, that has changed drastically.
Right, so the Secure 2.0 Act changed that. So now those kids who inherit that bulk of money only have 10 years before they have to completely liquidate the account.
And this particular year, which is kind of fascinating too, they haven't even final ruled, right? Because they've changed things so rapidly. They actually haven't even final ruled to say, well, can the kids defer out for 10 years, or do they actually need to take an annual inherited IRA distribution? And because there was so much confusion because of all the laws that are changing, they said, well, you know what, we're just going to punt and let's just shove this into the next year and kind of see. We'll rule on it then. And then they've changed it before then 3 or 4 other times. So the reality is they're jockeying for finding taxes, and they're going to figure out the best way that's going to benefit them, not you and I.
Right. But I think that's what makes it so sad is a lot of times, this number one concern. Folks don't want to be a tax burden or create a tax burden for their kids. how sad to think, oh, I've built up all this wealth, I'm going to leave it to my kids, what a blessing. But now because of the law change, it can be more of a burden than a blessing, right?
It is, and sadly, sometimes people haven't changed their beneficiaries properly. And as we like to say to clients, like, be sure that you have a true estate and asset protection plan so that you're getting a review and analysis of what should be and where you could be as opposed to where you are. And it's the same thing we do with the taxes. So the first thing we do is look at the taxes,
right,
so they can see the actual exposure that they're facing. But then, as we like to say, don't build the castle if you're not going to build the moat. To get yourself right with taxes, right, not only takes care of you and protects you, but also protects the next multiple generations for that matter, but definitely handles and protects the next generation. So basically, get informed, right, and then implement, right? Get educated and then implement the actual actions. That way you can have the peace of mind of knowing you're doing everything you can to get your ducks in a row, because the laws are changing around all of us
constantly,
rapidly.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Well, I think, the thing with that estate planning is it's never a fun thing to think about. I think that's why in my work as a financial educator, I've seen folks put this off because it's never fun to think about once you're no longer here, right? But I would argue it's by far one of the most loving things that you can ever do for those that you leave behind, is to make sure your ducks are in a row. And I appreciate that you walk people through this. You help decomplicate it, if you will. So talk a little bit about that process, what someone can expect.
Yeah, I think of Rita's story. I always give Rita credit for this story, but having a tax plan, we helped her and her husband save a tremendous amount of tax, but it wasn't just to prevent tax to the next generation, because we know that there's a lot of people out there that are saying, look, my kids are doing better than we are, my kids are doing just fine. But in lieu of giving extra money to the federal government, we'd much rather leave that to our family and our heirs. And so when we met with Rita, and it was fascinating, she said, I have 19 grandchildren, and I want you to figure out with all your fancy calculations, what their dates of birth, what a one-on-one grandma graduating cruise investment would look like in our overall comprehensive plan. And this tied into their estate, their tax, right? When you can live more, you can leave more.
Right.
And so it was fascinating. She said, Chuck, and she's got a really interesting story, but she said, Chuck, I want to be known to my family as a memory heir, not just a millionaire. And that has stuck with me.
Yeah, a memory heir, not just a millionaire.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so how did she define that? What did that
Well,
mean?
she said, being able to create the experiences, right? Because they're not going to remember the money. They're going to remember the memories. And so by being able to create these memories, by using what I like to say, otherwise spendable taxes, that people can actually have a tax plan, right? By having a tax team of strategic tax CPAs and having strategic tax and estate planners that actually specialize in that particular area, it's fascinating because we find that most of our clients, the tax person, the estate person doesn't know the tax person that doesn't know the retirement person. So by bringing everything into one view, right, through one lens, now those things can be synchronized and organized in a way that saves the optimal amount of tax, but also provides the peace of mind to not pass on unnecessary tax, especially with the attack on taxes with real estate, businesses, the capital gain tax rate proposed changes, crazy things that people wouldn't believe that our insiders in Washington are able to inform us. Again, when you work with 600 CPA firms from around the country, you have really good boots on the ground to know what's being proposed. And people just aren't prepared. They'll tell us on one hand, I haven't prepared the taxes right. On the other hand, you know what? I don't think my estate is probably in the best order. I haven't updated it. And those two things you don't want to leave to chance.
Right. And I think that is what contributes to that overwhelm, is when you have all these different people you're working with, but no one's looking at it from that comprehensive, holistic perspective. So I love that your team is able to bring all those pieces together. It's all under one roof. That makes it so easy.
Well, we took the chance, right? Because if someone says, well, I'm going to go back to my person, and then their person kind of gums it up in a nice way to say that, versus if all parties are on the same page and they understand what the end goal is, it's far more efficient, it's far more effective to just have a true holistic plan that basically involves all aspects of the plan, not having kind of as we say, the big box store brokerage, just accumulation focus. It's a distribution and preservation focus so that you can have all your ducks in a row. And whether people choose to work with our legal team or our tax team, it's irrelevant. We want to have that plan. And most of them do choose to work with them because they pick up on things that their folks either didn't take a proactive position or weren't aware of how to accomplish. And now they, the feedback we get is, it's a lot of peace of mind to know that we have our ducks in a row, and it just gives people the freedom, right? When you have direction, and that builds their confidence, right, and teaches them new capability, they're free to kind of go live more and leave more should they choose.
Yeah. to live more and leave more. What a beautiful legacy to be able to leave behind,
Absolutely.
right? Well, I know that for our viewers who call in today, they're going to be able to receive that opportunity to get a complimentary personal wealth blueprint from you and the team. Talk specifically about the estate planning piece that they're also going to receive as part of that.
Yeah, so it's a pretty straightforward questionnaire, right? And by being able to get that information, a lot of which we pick up from the information we ask from them, right? Their tax returns, but if they have a trust or if they, basically questionnaires, that by answering those questions, we can come back and it'll tell them how to properly title assets so they're not exposing themselves unnecessarily, how to hold beneficiaries, right? The way you title assets is a huge piece of this. So in many cases, things are not titled properly. And so that way they can actually get a real honest overview of here's where you are, but here's some recommendations of rethinking these areas because this is what's going to be impacted going forward that you weren't aware of. Or the person that did it 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it's just not up to date.
Right. Well, if you would like to remove the overwhelm from your estate planning process, if you want to make sure it's being done in the most tax-efficient manner, don't wait. We encourage you to pick up the phone and call 844-837-3652 to be able to schedule a time to meet with the team of Hidden Wealth Solution and receive your very own complimentary personal wealth blueprint. Or again, you're also welcome to take out your smartphone and you can scan that QR code. That will get you connected as well. More on this important conversation of the great wealth transfer right after this.
When was the last time you saw your financial professional? Are you getting the most out of the strategy that was created for you? Although you've done a great job finding someone to help plan for your future, are you 100% sure that you were given the right strategy? We can help answer these questions and more with a complimentary second opinion evaluation. We will take a look at what you have in place and then help determine if you're well positioned to get the most out of your future retirement income. In the event that it is not, we can help by making suggestions and showing you how to get on the right path. You wouldn't get just one opinion when it comes to a major health decision, so why would you treat your most important financial decision with such disregard? Call today for your no-cost, no-obligation second opinion evaluation to see if you're getting the most out of your retirement income plan.
Welcome back to Hidden Wealth TV, where we are committed to helping you discover and uncover your hidden wealth. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, here with Chuck Oliver from Hidden Wealth Solution. What a fabulous conversation we're having today, Chuck, all about the great wealth transfer, the fact that $84 trillion is estimated to pass from the baby boomer generation on down. We've talked about some of the implications of that. I'm curious, what are some of the risks that exist with this great wealth transfer that most folks aren't even aware of?
I'd say preparation for sure, like we talked about earlier in the program, right? That when you inherit these IRAs, right, the clients are not prepared for that to push them into paying higher taxes. Ideally, not just mitigating taxation, but preventing unnecessary taxation. Also the fact that I think a lot of people are forgetting about how their estate value is going to continue to compound over time. And with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act sunsetting, so this is not the time to be sitting on the sidelines. This is the time to get this addressed now because the threshold of what is exposing somebody's estate is going to change drastically. From we're hearing rumors from our legal team from 30 trillion down to maybe 6.5, 7 trillion per spouse.
Wow.
So it's going to drop in what they project in more than half. And we've got clients that are heavily exposed to that already, let alone before their estate continues to compound.
I mean, there's so much that goes into this, and again, you don't know what you don't know, and I think a lot of folks, it's easy to put off estate planning because, again, we talked about it. It's not fun to think about, but you can't afford not to think about it, especially with the tax risk, if you will, that is associated.
I'll give you
with
one
it.
other real big one, the transfer of basis versus step up in basis. So when somebody passes, usually the value you get is at the time of their passing. Now what Congress wants to do is transfer the original basis, the original purchase, business, stock, whatever it may be, and then without even having to sell it to trigger that capital gain, which they've now pushed that gain projection up to 44.6%, and I think Nancy we'll talk about here quickly, then that obviously exposes them like no other. So getting things transitioned now before too late is obviously important too.
So critical, absolutely. Well, I know that we are all about solutions here, right? It's Hidden Wealth Solution. We don't want to leave you with all the doomsday of all the things that can go wrong. Hopefully this is motivating you to think about, okay, your own situation and what you might need to do to get a solid plan in place. But let's talk about this client, Nancy, that you've worked with and how you were able to help her and her family.
So as we said, it kind of works both ways. So she's reaching out for her adult parents, both in their 90s, both living independently. They had successfully sold their business, and her siblings are very concerned. Her in particular, who's kind of in charge of overseeing the estate of the parents, of what the exposure is going to be, not just to the parents, but also to each of the siblings, right?
Sure, right.
And so she reached out and said, hey, do you kind of look at both facets of this? Like, because I'm going to need planning in particular with what my husband and I have already done, but we're going to be coming into some planning that we'd like to be proactive with so that you could help our parents prevent unnecessary estate tax issues for them, the timing, as well as the tax exposure. And so that's exactly what we're doing. And I think she's very pleased because now she sees, we can see it from both sides.
Right, yeah, and help both generations.
Right.
Help those that are leaving it, but help those who are inheriting it as well, because there's different considerations for both.
Absolutely, yep, for sure. And Barbara, we talked a little bit, I think in one of the other programs, looking out for her 4 adult daughters. Her and her husband have done very well. Their estate exposure right now is about $20 million of unnecessary tax.
Whoa, 20 million.
And they may live another
unnecessary
20
tax.
years.
Wow.
So that could accelerate from there. So they know they need to be doing something now. So they like the fact that we looked at both aspects, the tax exposure and the estate exposure, and the things that they could do to maneuver, right? Kind of bob and weave, the things that can be done now to prevent the unnecessary things happening later.
And I love that you're all about preventing, right, of the things that don't have to necessarily happen. That's a huge part of what it means to discover and uncover someone's hidden wealth, is to look for these opportunities and be proactive now.
Yeah, well, prepare, prevent, and protect. We always like to say the 3 Ps, prepare, prevent, and protect. And like we said before, right, there's 2 tax systems in this country, one for the informed and one for the uninformed, and it relates to tax in general as well as the estate tax, and people aren't prepared.
Yeah, well, I know we've covered a lot of ground today and probably created even more questions for our viewers out there, but what would you want to say in the last minute of the show to just encourage people to get their ducks in a row in this area?
You know, I would say, especially having both the tax team and the legal team as part of our holistic practice, is you don't want to sit on the sidelines. This is not the time to sit back and wait. We have a tax sale that's on right now that's going to expire, right? The Tax Cut and Jobs Act. If you're not familiar with that, you need to reach out and learn about it, and learn about the strategies and the solutions that are available to you before they take them away. There's a lot of legislative risks that we inform our clients about that they're not prepared for. So having a proactive plan, a holistic plan, is something that you don't want to sit on the sidelines. Take advantage before the advantages take advantage of you.
Wonderful. Chuck, thank you so much. We encourage you to reach out so that you can be prepared and protect and prevent falling into these traps. Again, that number to call is 844-837-3652. Thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to being back with you next time here at Hidden Wealth TV.